Elon Musk spoke at the SpaceX launch facility, and he revealed new SpaceX moon plans, as well as improvements to the rocket engines and the rockets themselves. We'll discuss all the exciting news in this video.
Yeah, I kept concentrating on Mars, but I didn't realize Elon has some really big plans for the moon.
The moon is closer, and you can get there in a couple of days versus 90 days to 180 days for Mars. So if you're going to develop Mars, you got to start with the moon. And that's what SpaceX is going to do. They have what they call Moonbase Alpha. There was a fantastic TV show in the 1970s called Space 1999. I love that show. And it talked about having a moon base on the moon. It was called Moonbase Alpha. They
Hmm.
also had some ridiculousness where they had a nuclear explosion on the moon and sending the moon out of orbit, which is,
Oh,
but the other stuff about it was really good. I recommend anyone to find it. So SpaceX has to solve the heat tile issues from the last launch because the rocket got to orbit, but it then burned up because they lost heat tiles on it. So they have to fix that problem. They're going to launch again in May. The Raptor engine, Elon revealed that they're onto the third version of the Raptor engine. So we can see this table here, Raptor 1 on the left, Raptor 2. Raptor 1 started about 185 tons of force at sea level. The Raptor 3 engine has 280 tons of force for that. And then they have the vacuum engine with more power, just the way the physics work. Also, it is far simpler.
no
Elon,
kidding. That's the thing that's just absolutely shocking.
right. Elon says the best part is no part. So instead of complicated hydraulics, they removed a lot of it. The other thing, though, is that this thing has within that engine bell at the bottom, it has cooling channels where the cryogenic fuel is going through to cool the whole all the material. You do not need a heat shield,
Wow.
so then you can reduce the weight of.
Wow.
So I've done a little table on that, going for the Raptor 1 engine, weighing about 100 kilograms, just about 2 tons, over 2 tons, and having that 185 tons at sea level. The Raptor 3 is getting close to half the weight.
Wow.
I'm
Oh,
thinking maybe 1,300 kilograms, and it has more thrust to weight ratio because of this weight reduction.
by a lot. Yeah.
Yeah, by a lot. And then there's the further version of the Raptor where they talk about getting to 450 bar of pressure. Like the more pressure, the more thrust, and perhaps getting even more weight out of it, getting to 330 tons of force. Elon did mention in this talk about getting to 330 tons of force, which would be another 25% improvement over what is currently out there as leading. Um, all of those 33 Raptor engines with the 280 tons of force, you're getting close to 3 times the thrust of the Saturn V of Apollo.
Wow.
And then we definitely get above that with the 330 tons of force.
And did you purposely skip over the reusable payload? Because it would seem like that would be the most important statistic of all.
Right. So down at the bottom of this table is reusable payload. So the original Raptor, they talked about getting 100 tons of payload. The current demos only have 40, 50 tons because they're demo prototypes, but they can get to 220 tons of reusable payload from these Raptor 3 rockets. And then if you have expendable, where I don't save the fuel to land
Right.
and go all out, then you can do it maybe 330 tons. And then for the more powerful two come engines with 330 tons, then you can get maybe 250 tons of payload, and perhaps even more if you lighten up other parts of the rocket.
Mm-hmm.
All this needs a refueling going to the moon, because they want to land on the moon with the full 200 tons, 250 tons, and they want to fill up their tank when they're in orbit. So then they'll have refueling tanker rockets that will go up and be designed specifically for refueling. They'll mate with the existing lunar rocket, transfer fuel, similar to how fighter jets currently in the United States have a K-49, KT-49 tanker engine plane, and then they while flying get refueled. This is the same.
This is one area where I've been a little confused. So on these tankers that go up, will these be expendable? They will just go deorbit and go into the ocean. Will these be reusable? How
Yeah, they will be reusable.
they'll be
They'll,
reusable?
they will be reusable because you don't want to expend those rockets, so they'll be reusable, but they'll be made for the purpose. So there won't be any
Right.
through section. There won't be. They'll take out as many things that aren't necessary to bringing as much fuel as possible
Right.
up.
Okay.
And they have done some tests, even that last failed launch where things burned up. They tried to transfer fuel from one small tank in the one rocket to another small tank.
Mm-hmm.
So with other mechanisms they're doing. So they want a rapid testing protocol where as we test, we're have the built-in things get to orbit. Let's do another fuel transfer test.
Right.
They want to get through the checklist of doing this activity.
Right.
Because NASA's paid them $3.5 billion
Right.
to get to the moon, ideally by 2026. So they have to do a lot of testing of the refueling in order to get there with as much payload. You could technically go to the moon with less payload, less refueling, but you then have to go in lighter. And because they want to land the whole rocket in the upper stage, unlike say an Apollo where you like separate out a small
Right.
a lander,
Right.
right? Then you can end up with less fuel. I only got 10% of my tank left, but now I'm going to use it for this small lander. So I'm going to send that to the moon slowly. And then, but here if I want to take the whole thing, that's why I need to refuel. So I want to,
Is it possible that this will be the first time that NASA has ever had a major contract with a producer that didn't come back and ask for more money?
Yes, this could be that first situation. Because typically they have what they call cost plus, which
Right.
means I can keep spending more money, and actually it's to my benefit
Right.
to spend more money because I'm getting more plus. So the more costs I have, I'm motivated to get more costs involved in the system. So here's on the SpaceX moon page, they talk about flying to the moon and back. So this would be, for those old to remember, Apollo 8 like mission.
Mm-hmm.
Apollo it goes to the moon, goes into orbit, comes on back.
Right.
Apollo 13 had to do that because they had an accident and just didn't land the moon and came back and just whipped around with free return. So this is the same deal, going free return. And the Japanese billionaire Yusaku Maezawa is taking those 10 other people with him on a trip to do this kind of Apollo 8 around the moon mission. One of the people, the third from the left, is Tim Dodd, the everyday astronaut, quite famous YouTuber with a few million subscribers.
Yeah.
So when they land on the moon, you can see the rockets up near the top of the rocket. So that's like 30 stories up, right?
Mm-hmm.
Why are they doing that? Because when we watched the second launch of the Starship on Earth,
Right.
it ripped up the strong Pondag cement pad,
Yeah.
and then threw up a bunch of rocks. You would rip up a lot of the regolith, the loose regolith, if you use the full rocket to land. Even though there's only 6 engines on it. We can go with far smaller engines because 1/6 the gravity
Yes.
means 1/36 the thrust to land the rocket.
Yeah.
And if I move it up higher, then less of that thrust. And kind of aim it a little sideways, because it goes an angle like that, then less is going directly down. So that thrust isn't even hitting what's below me is landing maybe like a mile away.
Wow. Didn't know about that. So will those be used to when you send it off again? Will it be used to to levitate it until it ignites, or will it ignite? Will it take off like normal?
You can launch with very small rockets. If people remember what it looked like when the Eagle
Yeah,
returned,
yeah,
the bomb stage was left, and then you had small rockets lift up the small Eagle. So because of this very small gravity, you can go off with, instead of 100 tons of force, I could go off with 10, 50, some smaller number, because the mass of the vehicle no longer weighs 100 tons;
right,
it weighs 15 tons,
right,
right?
right.
But Elon also said the lunar starships will not return to Earth. They'll have no heat shield and no landing flaps. They will have the landing pads that extend out toward the bottom, because they will be designed for going to the moon. So you have at least three kinds of starship. You have the regular Earth to orbit starship,
Right.
maybe four: Earth to orbit starships, Earth to Earth starships that never
Point,
go to orbit,
point to point. Yep.
point to point. You have the refueling tankers
Okay.
going up to refuel things the moon, and you have the lunar starship, right? And then you make a fifth one, a Mars starship
Wait a
version.
minute, wait a minute, wait a minute. You left one out, I think, because you're going to have a certain number of these guys that you take to the moon that will want to come back.
So you can transfer, just like I
Yeah,
can transfer fuel, I can transfer the people. So they would then transfer over to an orbital
I see.
starship, and then that starship would land with
I
them.
see. Okay.
So there were true transfers even back in the days of Skylab,
Yeah,
Soyuz.
sure, sure.
Yeah, so they would do transfers. This is a design using a lunar starship to make a moon base. So you want the regolith, the dirt, to be a heat shield. And if you were to tip it over, then you would be able to have like three layers. I could also remove the tanks and get far more volume out of it. If I reduce the cost of the Starship down to $50 million, $20 million, doing a bit of work would make it a moon base instead of billions of dollars. I can finish in 6 months. It'd be super cheap. I could just leave it there, landing, standing tall,
Yeah.
and then just going up an elevator up and down,
Right.
right? But if all I have to do is tip it over, it wouldn't be that much work to tip it over and then to slice it open and to do work on it.
Yeah.
And they're looking to land it at the Shackleton crater by the South Pole for main designs, because that's where lunar water is. At the two poles, the sun had not melted the ice down there. You can dig in and get ice, and there's a significant amount of water at those poles.
Hmm.
There should be some lunar landers going to those poles, and from very small commercial operations, Intuitive Machines, others that are going to the South Pole. China's trying to go there because they want to confirm the water,
I see.
which can be converted into fuel for rockets and other things, as well as drinking for people who are going to colonize. So that tip over the Lunar Starship plan shows where the methane tanks are, the oxygen tanks, where the normal payload would be, how it's 50 meters tall in total, and you're going to get more of the volume by tipping it over.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then they also designed various lunar buggies, construction equipment for working on the moon, to move that dirt around to do other construction work. And here's the hatches. Here's the 3 floors I was talking about. So a 3-story building that's 50 meters long, that's 150 feet long.
Yeah.
So half the length of a football field,
Yeah.
you know, and quite spacious for a lot of crew. And then you have life inside the construction site, where you'd be moving the dirt, doing site preparation, dealing with the lunar dust. The dust is very fine, gritty, so you don't want it getting into your living environment. It would, reduce, abrasively wear down components, machines, gear, etc. You could have also, they talk about hypergravity resistance areas, where if you have long-term stays, you do the extra exercise you need to maintain your bone and muscles.
Oh, yeah. Sure.
Return. to Earth. This was a design for a larger um, moon base that SpaceX had envisioned a few years ago. Not sure if the Moonbase Alpha plans are the same. They look like they have a lot of solar power, many moon and module zones, and then multiple landing sites. If you see in the picture, there are about 8, maybe 10 landing zones for multiple starships.
Mhm.
They did talk about the Mars plans, which we can go into more detail some other time. But they're saying that to go to Mars every 2 years to build a Mars city, they want to bring 1 million tons there.
Mhm.
Every 2 years, they want to bring 250,000 tons of material, which is about like 10 super tanker container ships full of material over there. And they will bring 1.5 million tons to orbit every time. What does this mean? This means over 1,000 starships going in a fleet to Mars every 2 years. And then you would have on the order of maybe 10,000 refueling missions to orbit to supply that fleet.
Did you kind of get the impression that Elon uh, is impressed by the idea of watching those go off? Like
Yeah,
all
yeah. I definitely want to see it. I think it'll look amazing. But the other thing is that if, let's say by 2030, 2032, I want to get my whole fleet going. I sent a smaller batch of 10
yeah,
or
yeah,
2 in an earlier mission to test things out, to start laying some stuff. And then I send my 1,000,
right.
right? That would mean I would need to start scaling up now,
Yeah,
years to a few hundred. And my lunar mission, Moonbase, I should be using like 10, 100. Like there'd be no point to making, oh, I only want to do a small moon base. I only want to use one lunar starship. That makes no sense because I got to get ready to send 1,000 over to Mars,
yeah,
right? I need to scale up. I need to make a big moon base. And then also, I should use and get supplies and practice mining and doing all the stuff I'm gonna do on Mars.
yeah,
I don't want to send 1,000 ships with gear that I've never used before. I want to try some stuff out on the moon before I go to Mars. I want to build stuff on the moon so I know the gear works.
yeah,
Sit out, be ready, so I can go there. And also, if I'm getting the lunar ice, making lunar fuel, um, that would also make everything work better. And also, if something goes wrong with 1,000 starships, maybe I want to bail out to some other locations. Having on the stuff on the moon, having a few cyclers, which are something designed by Buzz Aldrin, and others have designed it, where you have a base that cycles around between the Earth and Mars.
oh,
Basically, it's like you're going, Mars is going around, Earth is going around,
yeah,
and have something always looping around that's in that orbit
yeah,
between Earth and Mars. Again, a safe port
right,
where if you're flying over there and something goes wrong, and not like, okay, now you're just going off, bye
right.
bye.
Yes, yes,
I
yes.
can then go to some other location. So it's very exciting visions for the moon, Mars, orbit, and everything. So what do you think?
Yeah, so
Will it
it's
do it?
a yeah, so again, I was kind of I had this vision of what you just described as, on Mars. I kind of had the vision and the expectations of the kinds of things that they hope to achieve on Mars, but I had not really thought of. I guess I kind of think of the moon as being this big, rock that doesn't really have anything of value. And so why would you want to base there? But who knows? Maybe just the fact that it has lower gravity would allow some scientific experimentation. Maybe when they dig in, get some cores, some moon cores, they'll find some minerals or other things that would be valuable. Just bringing back enough moon dust or moon rocks in order for everybody to have a moon rock ring, that might be enough to justify it. I'm not sure.
So for me, it's people say, oh, the moon's so barren. One, it's the size of a continent. In terms of the area of the moon, each side is the size of the United States, right? So it is the eighth continent.
Yeah.
Antarctica is also a continent, and fine, we only spend 1,000 people there to research it. We don't want to break up the ice and do stuff.
Right.
I view the moon as the initial training ground for us taking over the whole solar system, right?
Yep.
It's the beginner location for us to do the rest.
Right.
And the fact that you have an entire continent planet there,
Right.
one, where we got the most minerals on Earth is where asteroids came, during the formation of the solar system, and they crashed in with heavy metals. All the uranium, all the stuff formed those other places. So the moon has all those hits too. It got hit by asteroids all over. So to think just because we don't see it sitting there on the surface,
Right.
Giant pile of diamonds or something like that, we have not looked. We just scanned some pictures and say, look, a bunch of regular. You have not dug in even a foot anywhere, right? So like we didn't know there was water there. It was just like we're just sitting there on the poles, right? So too quick to write off an entire continent.
There you go. All right. Well, it's a ton of fun to think about and to be able to see that once again, I hate to keep talking about him as if he was some kind of superhuman, but um, without Elon, we would not be going back to the moon right now. There's no chance. Without Elon, we wouldn't be contemplating this idea of populating Mars. And it's just kind of crazy to think about what one guy is accomplishing in 30 years, less than 30 years.
Yeah, it's a great time to be alive and to see these things realized and to have someone so capable. He's clearly a historic person. When you write the history books, you'll say, okay, there was Columbus, there was all of the people, and Elon making this happen. Especially if it does happen. The moon base happens, the Mars city happens, going beyond. It'd be tough to say that there was someone more important to human history up to that point.
Right. All right. Hey, great. I've enjoyed it.
Okay. Talk next time.